Welcome to Marin Poets Live. I'm Neshama Franklin. I work at the Fairfax Library and I love poetry. After this program airs on TV, it will appear on the Marin Free Library website as part of a digital archive, which also features biographies of the poets and links to our collection. For this month's program, we feature Catharine Clark-Sayles. Welcome, Catharine Clark-Sayles. And so here we are together, and we both have upper respiratory challenges, but I think it'll be, you listen really well when a voice is soft. So Joan will speak her poems softly, and we will listen with great eagerness to our first poem, which is often a Marin poem.
So my apologies for this rather strange voice, but we will do the best we can. This poem, there used to be a restaurant on 4th Street called Chinook. And the Chinook is the warm wind which brings the first thaw of spring. The Chinook arrives on 4th Street. The bees came slipping into a moment, chiseled from a long golden afternoon, gray at the edges with a promise of fog. Even the pigeons stopped their incessant circles, stopped tossing bits of leaf as if they expected loaves to float down. The pigeons stood still on their naked pink feet, and the toddlers in bright overalls ceased their centrifugal bouncing. In the shops, behind the plate glass, faces settled in rows, mouths forming silent film O's. Chewing stopped at the sidewalk cafe. Heads tilted to watch, traffic came to a halt in the pause between red and green, and the rattle of engines dulled like a shell held to the ear. The hum of bees swirled down to the street like an angry black fog. Ragged streamers twirled tighter, condensed to a liquid black mass dripping in clots from a manicured tree in a tub. Like a color at the edge of perception, their buzz filled the street, nearly subsonic. An uneasy mosaic of bees recreated the tree, while above the sign claimed Chinook. I must stop planning my life.
Oh, that is just great. That's a frozen moment on a street that's just around the corner. Mm-hmm. And the dill-dal, is that dilly-dallying? Or there's what I heard in there was the traffic dill-dal.
Oh, the traffic's stilled.
Stilled, okay. So
yeah.
I have to listen very carefully, and I love those O's, the O's of the mouth.
I like sound in my poems.
Yes, I can hear that. Let's have another.
We had Marin General Hospital a few years ago. They brought in a big herd of goats. Oh. Goats. A long day of electronic subversion. 7 computer crashes in the last hour. The phone blinks, incessant missing messages which the repairman can't explain. And tech support says, "Ma'am, your new TV is haunted," as it clicks on unasked at 3 a.m. Boiling on the edge of rant, I walk through the ER parking lot. One last call before home. Summer night, cooling as Scorpio wheels across the southern sky. The hill rings with metallic clangs, answered by bleats. Ma, ma, we've got goats, billies, nannies, kids, hundreds moving over the near vertical slope. They're munching the sound of a distant sea. The gift of pure hunger simplifies this day, shakes loose bubbles, something like laughter, something like tears.
I love that, batting back and forth with feeling, especially after the pressure, the horrible IT pressure. There's almost nothing worse. Now, you had slipped to me that you were on call, and now there's a link. So you work at Marin.
I'm actually a doctor, and I practice geriatrics, and most of my patients, when I need to hospitalize them, go to Marin General.
Oh, I love these revelations. I don't read it ahead of time. I find out from you.
Yeah.
And so, when did poetry enter your life?
I wrote as a child. When I went to medical school, probably college, I consciously stopped writing. I said, oh, I'm going to be a scientist, and scientists don't write poetry. Which, yeah. And then when I turned 40, I just said, my 20s disappeared, and I'm missing something. So I went back and started writing again.
Which I am so glad you do. So now let's have more of that. And by the way, I'm enjoying the faint thread of voice. I have to listen so carefully.
Well, as a doctor, I thought, well, I'll read one of my medical poems. There's a lot of them in this book.
Life and death.
Holding for Pat. I ask you, is there anything you want? When you say, I want to live, I skip a breath as if I'd fallen hard. You say, I'm sorry, I'm not good at this, as if death is a skill anyone learns. I want to say you should shout, rage, sow salt across your pillow top, but I take your hand, watch the slow meander of morphine-soaked thoughts slip away from the one enormous thing to distraction, wills, insurance, who will take the cats? Hiss of oxygen, click of IV, all the useless trappings I've hung around your bed, being human and unable yet to find acceptance in the sway of trees outside the window and the patch of sun that tracks the minutes across your floor. For a fierce and timeless moment, I pray, for miracles, for gentleness, for folding in. We sit in silence, and when you shake with tears, there is nothing but to hold you until the end.
Oh, that is the doctor's dilemma that I think everyone is struggling with now. And what are those three last attributes? The something, the something, the something. I want to hear that again.
For miracles?
Yes.
For gentleness, for folding in.
Yes, that can attend our lives constantly. And then that, who will take the cats, So it just goes in and out of everything we are.
Always the dilemma when you take care of someone who's also a friend.
Yes,
So.
yes. And so, that's the Dylan Thomas rage. But as you, I'm sure, have witnessed over and over again, sometimes it's time to give up the rage and give in, be enfolded like that.
Well,
Another poem, please.
Well, I do make house calls, so this is a very Marin poem. House calls. Montford, Molina, Lillian Lane, Miss Lillian of the Fragile Bones, weekly calls to report invisible thieves, 911 for missing teeth. Her house is still green but shorn of its Cape ivy pelt, and someone's repaired her dangerous stairs where I slipped and fell. On Amaseda, John's dahlias are gone. Slats of new deck part the sun from the beds where pom-pom colors popped, stopping traffic every June. Now the fug of John's cigars makes a faint reproach beneath the smell of carpeting and new paint. The new doctor on Kipling holds open house, proud of his first home. He talks plumbing and view. He's moved walls, refinished floors. I sip my Chardonnay, catch the shine from chrome and glass. His dining room, where Helen placed her hospital bed, liking her green view and city myth on foggy days. I wonder if the new doctor plans on house calls. He's figured mortgages in dollars and percent. Does he know the price of witness? Can he live in houses built of fragmentary faces and the tesserae of stories that they shed? This town, after 20 years of house calls, has its ghosts. Converted cottages vaulting into mansions of glass and stone, untroubled young eating persimmons from Mabel's tree, washing in Lou's claw-footed tub, taking as their due the gifts of someone's past. And if there are messages in the scraps of newsprint glued to the kitchen drawer, or the plastic soldiers forked up from flower beds, they must be counted. Still, the dark green paint bleeds through the new ivory of the door.
I just love those very quotidian details that really, and the wordplay in there. And I know Lillian Lane very well. I have a friend who
All
lived there.
very real places.
So I think you could probably count on the fingers of one hand a house call making doctors. Is this not true?
I think a lot of doctors will make an occasional house call. They just don't like to tell people about it because then everybody wants one.
Okay, tesserae. I love these words, but tell me what it means.
Those are those little chips of tile that are or marble that are used to make mosaics.
Yes, that which is broken becomes something whole.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, another one, please.
Let's see, I planned. I'm going to move to this other book. I wrote everything down on the numbers here so I can find them.
Right, but the time seizes us, and we do what's up front.
I wrote this one over at Santa Sabina on a retreat. Miracles don't often arrive with the sound of wings. More likely they creep in on furred feet or flit by as a purple petal on a cold wind, almost not noticed. As I turn and say, what? Ordinary miracles, like the way mashed and spoiling grapes become wine, or flour and water stirred can make bread, and fire. How smoke perfumes the autumn air, and you are back walking beside me through the crackling leaves. How I welcome you and love you, and don't grieve when you evaporate back into the night.
Wow, that's exquisite and very, very tasty. And also, is it a little ecclesiastical, dare I ask?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the whole idea
with
of
the bread and the
miracles,
wine,
yeah.
and the comfort in it, and the irony of such modest ingredients forming what it
And of
forms.
course, Santa Sabina is the old Dominican novitiate, so you're surrounded by, Catholic iconography, so it creeps in.
Right. Now, did it creep into your life, or did you grow up that way?
I was raised Episcopalian, and I'm sort of I would call myself more spiritual than religious, but I like Santa Sabina. They do silent retreats for poets usually about once a year, so I go every couple of years. I'll go to one of those.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's so kind of ironic, the poet silenced.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's interesting how they can create. They ring a bell. You get together once a day, and they ring a bell, and people read poems, and then they create the silence by ringing the bell again. And it's the idea that you can create silence by the noise on either side.
Yes. There is a poem right there in the making.
I've used that image a few times in poems.
Yes.
So.
Do you now, with your complicated, doctor-y schedule, where do you find your time to write your poems?
I tend to write late at night, and I don't have a very disciplined way of doing it, so I tend to jot things down periodically, and I'll think about an idea for, sometimes a week, and then sit down at 10 or 11 o'clock, start writing, and the next thing I know, my feet are dead, and it's 1 o'clock, and I have no idea where the time's gone.
Okay, you've gone into an altered state, definitely.
I love that sense of just, timelessness that occurs.
Yes, and it's in the poems as well, which we'll take another of.
Oh. I thought I would read one. This is an older one, and it's a little different. It's not a medical poem. My great-grandmother lived to be very old and lived on a farm in West Virginia, and I wrote this one after a visit to her farm. Actually, it's from when I was younger, but alchemy. Great-grandma stored summer in her cellar, dark, damp, smelling of earth plowed after rain, rain after days of dusty, hot sun. Her cellar, dug by ancestral hands, was lined with stones dug from the fields, slatted wood bins of potatoes nested in straw like lumpy brown eggs, shelves of jars, jewel-colored, dim, labeled beets, beans, peaches, plums, faintly glowing with the summer sun. 1961 was a good year for plums. A few dusty bottles near the floor from spring 1959, cherry wine, viscous, thick, the color of ink. Like an alchemist's lair where lead turned gold, Grandma's cellar turned earth to food, stored the sun of summer in dusty glass jars.
That's almost like a song to her.
Yeah.
That's very beautiful. What was the location?
West Virginia.
Ah.
She lived on a farm with my great uncle Fred until she was, I don't know, I think about 88. She finally died when she was about 98. But the farm had no electricity, no running water. She had a pump in the kitchen, a big cast iron stove in the front parlor, and a couple of great big feather beds. So yeah, I
That's a
visited
wonderful
there.
legacy.
Visited there when I was about 10 or 11. So.
And you are drawn to working with older people, obviously, or how did that come about?
I did my training in the Army at Letterman over in San Francisco. And Letterman tends to be a very large retirement population. And the chief of medicine wanted to take the geriatric boards, and he said, you and you were going to be a study group. And, you know, I love taking care of older people. I love their stories. So I'd say about 3/4 of my patients now are Medicare or older. I have a few 100-plus-year-olds, a lot of 90-plus-year-olds. So.
Right. So you have a glimpse down the corridor that many of us do not have.
Yeah.
And I bet it informs your poetry, of which I want another.
Actually, maybe I will read a geriatric poem.
Good.
It's a true story, and I tell it because I have her son's permission. Mercy for Camille. The nurse had insisted I must come, must address a feeding tube, and I thought of a conversation with a rubber hose. Monsieur, let me introduce you to Mrs. C. She is 109 and does not eat, in clear violation of Title 22. To lose weight is a finable offense, easily prevented by a tube in the nose. She had done nicely on brie and baguettes, nourishment for any Gaelic soul, until one too many falls brought her from her home to the mercy of a proper dietitian and a healthy diet of blandly low-fat food. Mrs. C ate little, then less. So, I said, we're worried. And she began. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed, quoting each line until the end, to mitigate the justice of your plea. She breathed. The world needs more Porsches. Are you going to be a Porsche? She got no tube. She did not eat. She died in a week. Her death a gentle rain.
That's magnificent.
Yeah,
there are such horrible things that happen to people in the name of. And there's a little play there with the quality of mercy is not strained, but I think of that strained food that they feed those people down the tube. That's so awful.
And I mean, you know, this was a woman that, you know, they're sitting there saying, and I walked out and I said, if she didn't want a tube, she's getting no tube.
Yes.
And I called her son, who's, you know, a very lovely, wonderful man. And, you know, as I said, she was 109 and she just decided it was
Let's
to
hear
stop.
it. Let's hear it for that clarity and that necessity.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, it's a fighting poem, actually, in its own way. We have about 4 minutes left, so let's have 4 minutes worth of poetry.
Ah, okay.
Ooh, the crunch.
Oh, what to read? Oh,
Yes.
well, it's Nurses Week, or it was just Nurses Week, so I'm going to read another hospital poem. Pressing to the glass. In the eternal unnight of the intensive care unit, surrounded by chirps and bleeps and blares of alarm, sleeping bodies press against the glass of night, uncertain if they are looking in or out, a charm of figures writ in light on screens overhead. Nurses in their Saturday scrubs, the chili pepper print, talking midnight potluck plans, moving bed to bed, checking, turning, emptying bags, unconscious of the din, until the ventilators fall into sync, breath in, breath out, and for a space of seconds, no alarms, not one bell, as even the nurses breathe as one, knowing just about of the balance where we all stand, and who may tell, breath in, breath out, how many million make a life, as through the window a gibbous moon rides down the night.
So that's like the bees. All of a sudden something happens in a very ordinary but charged situation.
Right.
Okay, one more, please.
Well, I was going to read that one, but I think I'm going to read something else.
Okay.
I'm going to read the last one and this one, which is another Marin poem.
Good. Parentheses.
A friend of mine has a boat called the Diva. Dancing with Diva for Barbara and Wendy. Under sail on the Diva, Angel Island ahead, sky brushed with fire, blue and gold, chrysanthemums of red and green against the night. We are rocking in the arms of Fred Astaire, a waltz over waves, willing to loose all control for 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We glide suspended into a back dip on these good waves, trusting buoyancy and the truth of fireworks, promised nothing but light, artfully placed. It is how the world holds us, with a startlement of photons exploding in an unquenched urge to rise, and we rise, each breath a long note of wonder.
Wow, your poems are very nurturing, and your job is very nurturing, and so it's a great package. And I just love to discover how life and art intertwine like this. So we have 1:33 seconds. We're not going to squeeze a poem in that, are we?
Well, I can try it. I have a very short
A
one.
very short one. Oh, the beauty of short poems, very short poems.
Sorry, I don't have it after all.
Okay.
I guess.
Well, is there anything you'd like to share and this last gasp of minute with those who are watching?
I am very delighted to be interviewed, and
Okay.
I'm very sorry for my voice. And of course, many of my friends are used to me. I have voice problems periodically. So.
Yes, you said, oh, so sad, a poet without a voice, but you definitely have a voice. It's that thin thread we followed, and I just loved it, even though it's hard, and I know that you could be more expressive, but the words are so expressive. They really did it. So thank you for struggling up and through. I'm so glad we did this, and I'm delighted to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.